Hello, comrades. I'm Llewyn. My pronouns are they and them, and I make Savage Craic. Today, I want to show you how to use the umami-rich properties of seaweed to make 100% plant-based kimchi. Now you can use dillis, kelps, rax, all kinds of seaweed to provide the glutamates that give us the savory depth of flavor that we're after. Personally, I recommend starting with a kelp in a dashi, and that's what we're going to do today. But first, we need to sweat this cabbage. Now before we get started, we do want to make sure to save a couple of outer leaves, and that little end bit. They might just come in handy later. How you chop the cabbage, and what cabbage you use, is really a matter of preference, as well as what's in season. The real key is to make a safe and successful lacto-fermentation, with a 2 to 3% salinity in an air-free environment. Since there is so much moisture within the cabbage, we're going to create that environment by salting and massaging it, which will produce our brine that we'll flavor later with chili paste. Now I'm using 23 grams of Irish sea salt, which is closer to 3%, since we're replacing some rather salty ingredients that would traditionally go in this ferment. Glutamate in the seaweed, however, does replace some of the need for salt, so there's a bit of leeway. To find a 2 or 3% measure of salt, all you really need to do is multiply the weight of your chopped cabbage by 0.02 or 0.03. Now to help this continue to release moisture, we'll weigh it down a bit while we go on to prepare our dashi. To prepare some umami-rich dashi for our kimchi paste, we'll need 200 to 300 milliliters of warm water. You can always add more later if you need to. Just remember that our cabbage is actively making its own brine. For this, I'm using about a palmful of sugar kelp that we collected in Galway Bay. Any kelp you can find will do the trick, and dillis, also known as dulse, is another great option. Now the reason we're using seaweed is to provide the necessary glutamate, which will give us umami. Umami is one of the 5 basic tastes, along with sour, bitter, sweet, and salty. When we eat something sweet, our body responds to the potential energy in the food. When we taste bitter or sour, our body actually reacts to a potential danger, which is why those foods are so stimulating. Then when the body detects umami, it prepares itself to receive protein. Hence, umami is considered savory. Knowing how to work with umami can be critical knowledge to any cuisine, but it's especially helpful when making plant-based foods. Now, while we let our dashi steep, we're going to add a few more ingredients to our mix before making our chili paste. First, let's add a couple of scallions. That allium goodness will add a good depth of flavor. I'm also going to add a rather fine julienne of carrot. Now you can feel free to simply grate some carrot if you like. I just rather like the texture. Some people like to add a bit of sugar to soften the heat from the paste. We have some lovely pears right now, so I'm going to add one of them as a mild sweetener. Again, I'm also adding a bit more sea salt in relation to the weight of these new ingredients, in this case, about 3 grams. One could also add more fresh chili to increase the heat, or radish, which is traditional and is a lovely flavor. Really, you can just look around at what's in season and what you have, and just always feel free to play. As a way to complete the umami flavor profile, we should also add ingredients that contain nucleotides. I happen to have a blend of several dried seaweeds we gather, which includes some red algae. Nucleotides are umami-boosting compounds that are found in shellfish, normally used in a recipe like this. Fortunately for us, they also come from vegetables like mushrooms and the red algae in my seaweed blend. So ultimately, this is a really simple formula to get the flavor we want. Nucleotides, like the mushrooms or our seaweed blend, support glutamate, which is in our dashi, and together, they make umami. Now, with all that together, let's move on to our paste. For the base, we're going to use a small onion, a decent knob of ginger, and a small head of garlic. Blend with your preferred method, and then we'll transfer that to a bowl. Now if you're doing this in a food processor, feel free to just add all of the following ingredients before mixing the paste in with our vegetables. This is where we introduce our dashi to the mix to create a deeply flavorsome catalyst for our Korean chili pepper. That chili pepper, gochugaru, gives this particular type of kimchi its signature taste, color, and heat. For this, I'm adding 100 grams of gochugaru to an equal measure of rice flour. Now, rice flour is a lovely gluten-free thickener that will blend with the dashi and all of our natural occurring brine in our cabbage. Once that's good and incorporated, we're going to get everything mixed together. While mixing our paste and vegetables, we can once again work to extract more brine from our cabbage. If we think of fermentation in just 3 phases, it can really reveal the simplicity behind this rather complex dance of microbes and compounds. Put simply, first, we prepare our vegetables, which is what we did when we massaged and salted our cabbage. Next, we flavor the vegetables, which is the purpose of this paste and where we add umami. And after we mix this all together, we give it the time that it needs to transform and to ferment. Now, before we pack this into a jar for its microbial journey, let's grab those cabbage leaves and end bits that we set aside earlier. By trimming a leaf around the base of our jar, I've made a cartouche, also known as a follower. This is going to help keep everything below the surface of the brine. Lactofermentation is anaerobic in nature and thrives in the saline-rich environment we've created. If everything stays there, away from the air above the brine, then we can encourage only the microbes that we want to develop. Now, if you can track down a funnel like this, usually sold for jams and chutneys, it'll help keep things cleaner as you pack away your kimchi. If not, don't worry, you can create a funnel out of one of the leaves that you saved or simply tidy up afterwards. We'll be doing a bit of that anyway. Make sure to leave some room at the top of your jar. Depending on your ingredients and fermentation vessel, you just may be packing more than one. It's important that you give that space, as it's going to be a bit active in there, and more brine is sure to develop. From here, we want to place our cartouche in the jar, and then use some type of weight to keep it submerged below the brine's surface. It's a good idea to keep an eye on this for the first couple of days when the bulk of the brine is still developing. Now, most of my weights are non-porous rocks that I collect in rivers and at the seashore. I simply boil them for 15-20 minutes when I first find them and in between ferments. Alternatively, you can use that cabbage end bit to help hold everything down. There we have it. Plant-based, umami-rich kimchi. Just make sure to burp this little fellow a couple times a day for the beginning of its fermentation. Start tasting it in about a week, and when it tastes fermented enough for you, put it into the fridge to slow fermentation, and enjoy. Well, thanks for watching, beautiful people. We trust that you'll ferment for life and keep feeding the spirit. Ciao for now.